Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I don't need to tell you that life gets hard. Life gets hard, really hard. But God's faithfulness is still active and alive in our hard. And these episodes are dedicated to remembering and claiming the promises of a faithful God. I'm your host, Angie Bauman. I'm a pastor and Bible teacher, founder of Steady On Ministries, and creator of the Step-by-Step Bible Study Method. But more than that, I'm a trauma and abuse survivor who carried a heavy weight of shame and worthlessness for many years. And I still struggle, but I live in much more freedom now because I know God through His Word and speak truth to the lies of the enemy with His Word. And that's what we do here. On Mondays, we take it in by studying the promises of God. And on Wednesdays, we live it out with teaching and testimony on the promises of God. So thank you for tuning in, my friend. You are the reason for this show. And I'm so very, very glad you are here. Let's get started. Hey there, friend. You are in for a treat today. At least I think so, because my guest is someone I've been hoping for a long time to be able to connect you with, and that is singer, songwriter, and worship leader Shannon Adducci. As the interview begins, I talked to Shannon about what her music has meant to me through the years, and there was so much more that I wanted to say, but I tried to say the most important things and then yield the floor because you hear me talk all the time, and I so wanted you to hear from her. Shannon did not disappoint. She's honest and open about her story, her struggles, and her doubts. I look at her and I think, how is it possible that you ever doubt that God is using you in a mighty way? And I suppose there may be people who say that about me too. Beth Moore says, we assume others aren't insecure if they appear to have the thing that we long to have. Isn't that so true? But here we are, me, you, Shannon, all facing the temptation to doubt that we matter and we are enough and that we are loved. Our verse this week is as dear to me as Shannon is. It is the very first passage in the Bible that I memorized in kindergarten at Independence Christian School in Independence, Missouri. And I'm sharing it from the King James Version because that's how it was first taught to me. Psalm 101 says, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands." You may not be a singer or a songwriter, but you have a joyful noise. As you listen to how Shannon comes before the Lord with singing, I hope it invites you to consider how coming before Him with singing looks like in your life too. Let's listen in. Shannon, welcome to the Steady On community.
Aw, thank you. Good to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation, and I want to let the listeners know why I'm so excited. Because I want to say that my watching you or my being touched by your music and your ministry spans about 2 decades now. So I guess we're showing our age just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Just a smidge.
I know. And so you started singing when you were like 2, probably recording
Yeah,
music, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's been about 20 years ago because my oldest son is 18, almost 19, and he wasn't born yet. So I know it's been close to that long. I first was introduced to you and briefly met you at a conference in Kansas City, Missouri. You were there with a Maranatha conference. I don't even remember the Kansas City area. Yeah. And I learned 2 things from that conference. One was the difference between vertical and horizontal music. Okay, that's one thing. So I was a brand new worship leader. Yes, and I learned that. And I thought, and that's been very useful to me in ministry ever since then. And the other thing that I learned was that I just adored you. I just loved your music. I loved your heart. So you came and spoke to us about leading worship, from the heart. And I don't remember the other lady that you were there with that was a friend of yours.
I think it was Leanne Albrecht.
I think that sounds right.
Yes. She was leading our team. Yeah. And then we could all break out into the sessions.
And you sang for us. And my friend Maria and I were there. We were brand new worship leaders at the church that we were serving. We didn't know what we were doing at all, but we wanted to do it well. And we both just really loved you and what you had to offer that day. And we began to buy up your albums as fast as we could get our hands on them. And I just fell in love with your music. And then I followed your journey after your first husband's motorcycle accident in 2009, I believe. Do I have the date right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's correct.
And in the summer of 2010, our family of 4 was in a head-on car crash, and we had multiple surgeries, hospital stays, therapy. My listeners, know pieces of that story. I share that kind of all the time. And as we went through that, you were ahead of me on that journey. You were writing things and singing things about your journey and about the way you clung to God. And your album, I Have a Song, was on repeat in this house as I went through that.
We were kindred spirits.
We were. I just really felt that. And as a matter of fact, I began to buy those CDs of I Have a Song, and I created this letter because people would reach out to me when they were going through something really hard, because they knew that I had gone through something. And I wrote this letter about how your music touched my soul during that time, and I would send them this letter, and I would send them a CD of your album. Wow. I know, I'm telling you the truth. I'm really not cool. Like, I just really want to have the opportunity to tell you what your music has meant to me. And I would send it to people, and as soon as I sent it, I'd buy another one. So I had it handy, when I felt like somebody needed it. And those songs were a balm to me. And I don't mind telling the listeners that I've not quite harassed you, but I have emailed you a few times and said, if the time is ever right, I would love to talk with you. And I knew the time would be right someday. And so I really just say all of that to let you know how much your music and your ministry has meant to me through the years, and to thank you for putting it out into the world. So,
well, that blesses me and just encourages my heart. And like we were just saying a few minutes ago, reminds me of why the Lord has me doing what I'm doing, because that's the point, to bring him glory, but secondarily
it is
to encourage others. Otherwise, why do it?
That's right. Some of the songs, I can tell you, You Are My Refuge. That's one that I love. I love In the Waiting. I Have a Song, This Is the Day, From the Rising. I love that song so much. I love your Christmas album. I've given that to more people than I than I could. So it's really good stuff, friends. And so she has a new album. Shannon has a new album, which is why we're talking today.
Coming.
It is fantastic. And so tell us a little bit about it. I'm going to let you talk now, I promise. Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh no, I like listening, and I'd rather interview you, honestly.
No. Why is now the right time in your life and your career to be releasing new music?
Oh golly. Boy, that's a loaded question. Well, it's been a while. It's been a minute, as people say, since I've done a recorded project. I've been writing the whole time and continue to lead worship. I'm a worship leader at my church, like you are, and I just had a series and a season of just not entirely traumatic stuff, but a lot of traumatic stuff, and then just lots of changes, and sometimes, like I guess in 2010, like you were talking about, you can write creatively and find kind of a place to create in the midst of that trauma, and then there's other times that you are so traumatized that you got nothing. You're just like, it's not that you don't have anything, but you're literally clinging on to dear life, and you're so spent that you just, so I would say there were seasons. So I guess my last project was maybe 2014 or 15 or something, somewhere in there. I probably have that wrong, but after that, just went through a really, really challenging season with going through a divorce. And that was just very unforeseen and very traumatic. And it wasn't just the divorce, but it was just all this really weird psychological torment before that was occurring in the relationship. And it was really, really hard. So I was already spent. And then that started to happen. And then it turned into a whole thing with my son, with custody. And it was just, I didn't have anything really that I could offer, other than I was leading worship, and I was in a really safe place with people I knew that loved me and that were surrounding me. And I was just kind of hunkered down with Jesus and my friends. That was about it.
No, I love that.
So
Hunkered down with Jesus. We can all learn from that and pick that up, friend.
well,
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, you don't always choose it, but you're like, woo, take cover. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was this long stretch and, you know, time flies. And then the Lord really brought me through and continues to bring me through healing. And then in 2018, I married my husband, Joe Adducci, who is wonderful and a gift, like just a gift from the Lord, kind, gentle, supportive, loving, fun, loves Jesus, just a gift. Well, so that's a good thing, but that still takes a lot of energy and you're devoting your heart. So I was writing, but still wasn't really the right time to record. And then we got married. We both, well, I rented out my house, he sold his house, and we bought a house kind of in the middle because our jobs were a little bit far from one another. And then I'd have to look at the calendar to remember the exact date, but it was maybe a year and a half into our marriage, and my dad got diagnosed with brain cancer. And I think that was when you first emailed me about being interviewed, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I was full-time caregiver. My dad moved in with us after having a seizure and being diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is brain cancer. And we were full-time caregivers. I mean, I was his primary caregiver, and that obviously wasn't planned, and I wouldn't change it for the world. You know, I was trying to write a little bit, and I kept thinking, oh, it's time, or, you know, at different points during that, you know, 8-year stretch, and it just wouldn't be. And I'd feel discouraged. And then I'd just really have to go, Lord, I'm just taking my hands off of this, because this isn't about me. I mean, if we try to build it ourselves, we labor in vain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I could feel that, like that sense of, like I had to prove myself, or I better get this done,
or I'll get left behind, or they'll forget about me, right? Like
absolutely. That's been a battle the whole time, off and on. And then I'll resurrender and go, Lord, I really do trust your timing, even though it makes no sense sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so that was a really long answer. My husband's always like, you're very detailed. I'm like, yes. I like stories like that. But so my dad, sadly, he lived with glioblastoma and fought valiantly and with a lot of joy and positivity. It was really remarkable for me to see my dad in a way that I had never seen him. My parents got divorced when I was 12. And so I lived with my mom, you know, and saw my dad, of course, but my dad wasn't as much on the scene. So it was really this season of healing and getting to see my dad in a light that I never would have seen had we not taken him into our home. And so it was a gift, and I would not trade that. But all along the way, I'm like, well, someday maybe I'll record. I mean, there was a point where I thought, well, maybe I'm going to do something else, Lord. I don't want to make the assumption that I'm just, you know, from the time I'm an infant till the time I'm 90, I'm going to be doing worship later, you know.
Right.
What if God just wanted to change directions? Well, for whatever reason, he didn't. So my dad passed away in December of 2021. And I was writing a little bit before then, but really I felt a sense of release after that. I'm sure in the natural too, because I wasn't, you know, 24/7. I mean, it really was 24/7. We had walkie-talkies because he could have a seizure. I mean, it was intense. So then God just started giving me these songs. And then there came a point where the enemy, you know, the enemy loves to discourage you, and just in every way. And then I have an easy time discouraging myself too. I can get that way. And so it was a combination of the two, and just like, kind of like you just said, well, you know, it's been a long time. You probably, you haven't been up on your social media.
Mm-hmm.
You've been left behind. It really, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And so maybe you shouldn't even really bother. And so there really was an attack, certainly at different points. And then I felt like a point where God really showed me this scripture that I will not offer him something that costs me nothing. I remember that distinctly. And the Lord really used that and just a time with him to affirm that, yes, I'm asking you to do this. And it is going to cost you not only, in the natural, but it's going to cost you. You're going to lay down your agenda. You're going to lay down everything you think. But I'm going to do it. And so anyway, that was a really long answer.
No, I want to circle back on a couple of different things. One,
Okay.
I want to say, I appreciate what you're saying about even being open to maybe I'm not doing this anymore, right? When I first met you and was introduced to your music, I was leading worship, and after about 6 years of doing that, the Lord called me into he called me into pastoral ministry when I was 8. And he reaffirmed that calling several times in my life, which I continue to ignore. But I thought, well, maybe worship pastoring is the thing for a variety of reasons. Maybe worship pastoring suffices or something like that.
Yeah,
Not because it's less than. That's not in any way, shape, but it wasn't the calling on my life, is what I mean. And so maybe I can do this because
it was more comfortable
for me. Yeah, even though I wasn't like a singer, but it was anyway, yes. But what I felt at that point then, when that kind of season was coming to an end, was there was this obedience issue. I feel like what you're saying a little bit, like, am I still called to this? If I am still called to this, it's going to cost me something. I think I have the scripture. I'll read it just a second and see if that's the right one. But am I willing to still do that? Am I willing to step out in the way the Lord is calling me to, whether it's using me this way, still using me a different way, not using me for a season? That's a big ask of the Lord, but it's a big surrender on our part. See if this is it. 2 Samuel 24:24. But the king replied to Arna, no, I insist on paying for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. Is that the
that was it?
Yeah. So that's 2 Samuel 24:24. But I appreciate you being able to say that. Like, are you setting me aside, or are you calling me to something different? Not set aside because you don't want me, but set aside because maybe I've made this about me now and it needs to be about you. I think, all those wrestling questions are so important as we continue to discern, because he doesn't really leave us where we're comfortable. That's the thing.
Doesn't tend to.
No.
He's not a fan of that. Doesn't seem like.
No. So that's
so that song, one of the title track of my new project, and it was one of the first songs I wrote for it, that it's probably like a podcast. You have a lot of material and you kind of whittle it down and you figure out what's going to fit. So that's kind of how it is with songwriting, with the project. You're like, I keep writing and writing and writing, and then you kind of just go, Lord, which are the ones that are supposed to be on this? What feels right? So one of the songs I wrote while I was wrestling with all this, because I was feeling just so inadequate, not necessarily in my gifting or my, ability to write or sing or whatever, but just inadequate as like, how it's hard to describe. I think we've all felt it, but just the way the enemy attacks and makes us feel like we're just not good enough in some way, whatever it is.
Yep.
And I was feeling that in so many ways. And that song Loved was birthed from that, because I just needed to say to my own soul, I am not what I do. I'm not measured by how the world sees me. I have nothing to prove. I'm not gauging my worth by my feelings. I'm not less and I'm not more based on who's keeping score. And so then it just says, I am loved. I am loved. And I had to remind myself of my identity. And that's just what that song's about. And that was the place I had to come to when I was like, okay, I am going to do this new recording and step out. And I feel insecure in a lot of ways about it, just for a variety of reasons. But I want to operate from my core identity, which is I am a child of God and I am loved. Like, not because of what I do, not because I sing, not because someday I'm not going to sing. They're not going to want me up there when I'm 90, you know? And if I put all my eggs in that basket and I keep finding my identity and just my resume, I'm always going to come up short. It doesn't matter how much I accomplish or how little I accomplish. So that was a really freeing process, writing that. And then when I go back and sing it, or I think about how the Lord met me, it kind of sets me free each time, because it's so easy to go back to that place.
It is. I did a verse study just a while back that has meant so much to me. It's Psalm 34:5. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame. And I really felt like that what you're saying is when we look to him, when we lock eyes with him, we feel his love for us. Like we do, you know? And when we feel loved, we shine. The Hebrew word for radiant is to sparkle. And I loved that, because it's like, as I lock eyes with you, as I look to you and I receive your love, that's evident in my life. And I'm not looking to add to my resume, and I'm not looking at my numbers, and I'm not looking at this or thinking about the fact they don't want me here when I'm 90. I'm thinking about your love for me and how it's incorruptible, right? It's not in question. It's not going to be compromised. I don't have to do something. I love those words that you were just saying, because when I operate out of that place, I'm like the best, most confident, secure version of myself. Right.
And you're free.
Yes.
There's like a place of freedom. Like cause I contend toward anxiety sometimes, which my whole album, I have a song that you mentioned earlier that was written from a place of wrestling with anxiety. I mean, it was just like literally like I was dealing with, panic attacks, just all kinds of stuff, post-trauma stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just like, but when you find that place of freedom and just like, I'm just absolutely defined by who you say I am, Lord.
And am I willing to submit to agreeing to that? That's been something that the Lord's been teaching me too, is really like agreeing with him about his love for me is an act of submission on my part. Am I going to argue with you about that? Like that's new to me.
I need to write that down.
He's just working on me with that right now. Like, actually, this is my like command, if you will. I love you. I have created you. I have called you. You are a masterpiece. Like, I will never leave you. Like, really, is it about, can it be about, or maybe it should be about, for lack of a better way to say it, my willingness to submit to what you're already telling me is true, and
not adding to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
exactly.
Like how I struggle with this, spending time with the Lord and really feeling like I've gotten a word from him that's really defining. And I feel, like maybe I've had a hard night or something, and I've gotten up that morning and spent time with the Lord, and I feel really at peace. I've spent time in his word, and I feel like I've got fresh manna. And then it could be an hour later, I'm sitting in front of my computer working on, mostly if it's something like social media related or something, you get sucked into this weird vortex of what's my identity? I mean, and then
comparison
I have a
for
hard
me.
time. Oh, absolutely.
Comparison. Yeah, that kills me. Yeah.
And then going, why bother? It's like this trail that the enemy wants you to follow. So I am really yearning for the Lord to help me and for me to help myself figure out how to carry that place of absolute contentedness in him and freedom and just knowing my identity into all the different interactions that really are required to fulfill the ministries that he's called us to, because we're using worldly tools, or tools that God's allowed the world to use and to come up with, like social media and Zoom and all the things that we use. But man, the enemy's in there too, trying to
always.
So I'm trying to figure that
I know.
How do I
Same.
balance it?
Yes. I have friends like that have really strong feelings about like being off of social media. I have friends, ministry friends that are really, feel like we need to be on it to have a voice. I have friends that are trying to climb with numbers and things like that. And it's just such a confusing world that invites so much
is.
comparison.
Absolutely.
And I told my husband a while back on one of the days that I was like, I think I'm quitting, which happens, more frequently than I care to admit. But, I don't
very
really mean it.
normal.
I don't
I
really
know.
mean it, but I do too.
It
Because
feels
I'm
good
just
to
like,
say
yes,
it.
I think I'm going to quit doing this because who would care? But what I really feel like I've learned, and I'm not good at this, but I'm just going to say what I know to be true about myself is when I feel like quitting, when I'm dissatisfied with the ministry or with what I think God is doing in the ministry, I'm really focusing on what the ministry does for me. And when I'm satisfied with the ministry,
that's a good
I'm
word.
focused on what the ministry can do or is doing for other people. Like when I really think about that, I hate to admit it, but I also hate to admit that I know it and still do it. Why do we do it? But I think it is the enemy getting in there and saying, they're
and
not
human nature.
Yes.
You're
getting left behind. You're not keeping up. You're not doing enough. Oh, it's just blah in there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting change for me because the last time I did a project, social media didn't quite have the grip on the world that it does now.
Mhm.
Whereas like if you're not on there, you're considered, irrelevant or something. And it's like, well, maybe not. I mean, Jesus did a lot of things that were very counterculture and he's not irrelevant.
Right.
So at the same time,
I know.
I don't know.
I know.
But you're so right. When I get an email or like the encouraging words that you shared earlier. And again, I don't want to make it about pride and woo, look at what you did. But like where it's like, oh, I see that God's really using these songs. And I can see that he ordered my steps. He allowed me to create these. He gave me the gift in order to do this. He gave me the provision to be able to record them.
Right.
So Lord, I entrust that to you. And thank you, Lord, for the fruit that you're bearing. I mean, through me.
Yes.
Instead of, you're exactly right. Because if I get focused too much on, I got to get this done. What's this person going to think if I don't do this? Or what?
I mean, it's just this fast spiral down.
A dark place.
No. And here's the thing that I know when I start doing that, I need to get up and walk away. I need to go back to that devotion I read this morning. I need to remember, like you were saying, but sometimes I'm like, no, I'm just going to stay right in it. And then that, it's just this fast spiral down. Yeah. So
it is.
Yeah. I hate that connects us, but it's somewhat encouraging too.
Well, I think I would venture to say even people that we're probably comparing ourselves to are comparing themselves to someone else.
Absolutely.
There is no
arrived.
No. Mm-mm. So it really is just finding that place in the Lord and going, Lord, I trust you with where you have my tent pegs here. And if you want to expand them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, it's not even necessarily going to be based on numbers that we see with our eyes.
Right. Yes.
There's so much fruit, things that he's doing in the supernatural that we can't know, can't even measure.
Right. My husband tells me that too. I keep bringing him up, but he's like, for every person that reaches out, Ange, you don't know the people that don't reach, that just don't, they don't take the time or they don't think about it or they don't know how to or whatever. And our messages, they matter. And I just want to affirm that in you, especially, but all of us, it doesn't matter if you're singing or doing podcasts or what, like God has called you to kingdom work
wherever he's planted
and the work that you're doing matters. Yeah.
Yes.
So let me ask you this question, just kind of switch topics real quick. Just tell me what does it mean to you to have led worship so many times when you're at your church or when you go travel and you lead and people are singing and you feel that sense of worship? Would you just share kind of like what the Lord does in your heart and what that means to you? Because I know you haven't done it this long without it being something that's just really important and special to you.
Yeah. The first time I started on my praise team was when I was 10. And my mom was a worship leader. And so I grew up, she gave her life to the Lord when I was 6. She was an atheist before that. But
You have
And
lots of
then
layers to your story.
I know,
Yeah. I love it,
know.
yeah.
And so she became a worship leader. My parents were both musical. And so I got involved in worship and learned, I guess that was my first safe place, really. Because I played piano for a long time, but it was actually when my parents got divorced, that I really started just sitting behind the piano to worship. And I wouldn't even have necessarily known what to call it, but it was just this place of like, this is where I find my Father. Like, this is where I find him. And this is where I feel absolutely whole and safe, when I'm just receiving, giving. There's a reciprocal thing going on. So that started really early for me. And I really think it was God's way of protecting me in a lot of ways, because it kept me really kind of grounded. Whereas I mean, every kid makes stupid decisions, but I think it kept me kind of in a good little incubator with him. So over the years, I think it's been that same thing. And our hope, as a worship leader, is that it's an overflow of what we're already experiencing.
Yes.
So it's a calling to lead others, not to ourselves, God forbid, but to lead, just help kind of facilitate them going to him. And so for me, that's just an honor. That's a place of humility.
Yeah.
And so, and it's still a safe place for me.
Oh, I love that.
And so it's like, okay. And I do, when I record my albums and I go and sing, I don't even really like to use the word perform, because I feel, it is a performance, but it's like a time of ministry, because it's just singing these songs that the Lord just kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Flowed through me. And so I weave it together with other worship and, try to just share. Yeah. But anyway, I don't know if I answered that, but
no, yeah, you did. I think when I listen to your music, there's a simplicity and honesty about it that's just so important to me. And I feel like you're a modern day psalmist. Like, I feel like your songs and your lyrics just are the honesty that is in the Psalms, and crying out to the Lord, praising him. So often I feel like your songs praise him in the same song. You're praising him and crying out to him in your anxiety or distress, right? Yeah. And
that's very true.
And that's very much what I feel in the Psalms, where there's this safe space to say, whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm experiencing is welcome here. And so you encourage me to remember that.
And I think it's just been, something the Lord's just taught me over the years, and then I'm obviously still going to learn till I go to be with him. But just like, he is an absolute safe place. And that doesn't mean I always feel safe in my circumstances necessarily. There's been times that I've been like, seriously, Lord, like, my life just combusted or whatever in the natural. And you've experienced that. Yeah. But there is always a safe place with him. He is absolutely there, supporting us, upholding us with all that he is, and also able to take it. Like, he is so able to take whatever we're feeling, saying. And I find I feel almost congested spiritually if I don't if I try to come to some spiritual plateau. I'm going to spend time in the Word, and I'm going to say, I don't even know what I'm doing, but it's like just to check a box or something. But I can feel like this congestion. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Where you're like, no, I just need to say some things. And once I get it out, whether it's just talking, writing, I love to write. I'm not always a super regular journaler, but sometimes I just write and write and write. Or sometimes just sitting at the piano. And that is totally, I would say 95% of my songs, they tend to be like, I'm processing something with the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then helping me get to a
Yes.
point or
And
something.
you've gifted us. I think for me, I'll say it for myself, but I think this is true for other people too. You've gifted us with the ability to put language to some of that processing, and so as you have put language to your own processing, it invites us to be able to be honest and put language to ours. Sometimes I don't know what I want to say, but then I listen to something that you've written and sung and I'm like, yes, that's what I want to say.
that
That's what I
blesses
want to
me
say.
big time.
So yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful for your time. I am
I'm so
glad
great.
that we have been able to
fun.
do this. And it's just my joy to share you with this community that I love so much. And so I'm just going to say that Shannon can be found at shannonadduccimusic.com. And her new album is called Loved. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes where you can find some samples for the music. All the links for all the places that you can find and follow Shannon will be in today's show notes. And again, Shannon, we just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, friend, for listening. Until next time, peace. Oh, friend, so much thanks to Shannon Adducci for sharing her Live It Out testimony today. Her new album is simply called Loved, and I encourage you to find it, download it, listen to it, and be blessed by it. The link for song samples is in today's show notes. Our verse again this week is Psalm 101. Hear it this time in the voice. Raise your voices. Make a beautiful noise to the eternal, all the earth. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to listen to Monday's Take It In episode where I unpack this verse and focus on the word make. Next week, our Take It In verse will be 1 John 4:4, and it tells us that we have overcome the evil and false teachers of the world because the one who is in us is greater than the one in the world. And my guest is going to be Stephen Snook. Stephen's story made for one of the most uncomfortable interviews I've done so far, and not because of Stephen, but because his story and life experiences are so very different than mine. Stephen started dealing drugs when he was 15, became a major drug trafficker by 19, and spent 2 decades in prison for his crimes. But prison is where he met Jesus, and his life, even in the darkness of prison, became a light for others to see, and his story will be our Live It Out on 1 John 4:4. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever directory you're using to listen. It only takes a second. It helps the show a great deal, and it guarantees that you will see new episodes as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.